Welcome back. In this section, we're going to push the realism much further. Up to this point, the primary forms are working. The glaze already reads as believable, but realism lives in subtle detail. Now we'll focus on microsurface variation, tiny pores, soft irregularities, and thickness changes in the glaze. These are details you don't consciously notice at first, but if they're missing, the model feels artificial. We'll also refine how gravity affects the glaze, especially near the base of the drips. When this behavior feels correct, the donut stops looking like a clean 3D asset and starts feeling real donut. Alright, let's begin with thickness variation. Real glaze is never uniformly thick. It pools across the top, then stretches thinner as it flows toward the edges and drips. To recreate that, we'll use vertex groups and weight painting. Go to the Object Data Properties tab, the green triangle icon. Under Vertex Groups, click the plus button to create a new group. Then give it a clear name, something like Thickness Weight. This group will store weight values that control how strongly the Solidify modifier affects different areas. Now switch from Object Mode to Weight Paint Mode. You can use the drop-down in the top left, or press Ctrl-Tab and choose Weight Paint. The glaze will turn blue. Blue means zero influence, no additional thickness. Before painting, set the weight value to 1 and the strength to 1. We want full intensity for the heaviest areas. Now begin painting the very top center of the glaze in red. Red means full influence, maximum thickness. Move slowly. Observe the surface. Think about where glaze would naturally gather, where it would be deepest and slowest to move. The top center usually carries the most mass. Paint around the ring, keeping it consistent. Next, paint the base of each drip in red. Focus on the connection point where the drip meets the main glaze layer. These are anchor points, where glaze pools before gravity pulls it downward. Work around the donut patiently. Keep your brush controlled. If it feels too large, reduce the radius slightly. I prefer maintaining a consistent brush size so long and wide drips feel cohesive. For now, don't worry about absolute precision. We can refine later. Next, lower the strength to around 0.2. Now paint the tips of the drips with a lighter color, closer to blue or light green. These are the thinnest areas. In real life, these stretched tips would appear slightly translucent. Think in gradients, thick at the top, gradually thinning as the glaze flows downward, lightest at the tips. That smooth transition is what makes this convincing. Move around the surface and introduce soft green areas, a middle range between red and blue. Avoid harsh transitions. We want subtle blending. Now, reduce the weight value even further, and slightly reduce the brush size. If you notice paint where it doesn't belong, gently remove it. This process is flexible. You paint, you observe, you adjust. If your initial brushwork was already controlled, you may not need much correction. There's no need to overwork it. If you see sharp color boundaries, lightly brush over those transitions to soften the gradient. If it already looks smooth, leave it. Once the painting feels balanced, return to the Modifiers tab. In the Solidify modifier, locate the Vertex Group field. Select Thickness Weight from the drop-down. Switch back to Object Mode using Ctrl-Tab. Now the Solidify thickness is driven by your weight paint. Red areas receive full thickness, blue areas receive almost none. Everything in between transitions proportionally. Adjust the thickness value itself. Start around 0.04, then test values up to 0.06. Watch how the glaze updates in real time. In my case, 0.04 feels right. Yours may differ slightly. Just observe how the surface responds. This variation becomes especially important later when we add materials and transmission. Thinner areas will allow more light to pass through, creating that subtle wet translucency. Thicker areas will feel denser, closer to opaque sugar. Once the glaze feels balanced, not too thick, not too thin, you could apply the solidify modifier. But I recommend keeping it unapplied for now. We'll be adding additional modifiers, and modifier order matters in Blender. When everything is finalized, we'll apply them in the correct sequence to preserve the result we want. Alright, the glaze also needs surface texture. Right now, it's still a little too clean, too uniform, almost plastic. Real glaze have tiny sugar grains, small cracks, and subtle unevenness. So let's build that noise texture into the surface. To do this, we'll use the displace modifier. Unlike shading tricks, displacement actually moves geometry. It pushes vertices in and out using a texture, which gives us true 3D surface detail, air bubbles, and gentle cracks. Before adding it, check your mesh density. If the geometry is too low, displacement will look faceted. Make sure your subdivision surface modifier is set to at least viewport level 2. Click Add Modifier, and under Deform, choose Displace. At first, the donut may distort in a strange way. That's normal. There's no texture assigned yet, so Blender is displacing the surface blindly. Let's fix that. In the Displace modifier, click New to create a texture. Then go to the Texture Properties panel. Change the texture type to Noise. Noise works well here because it creates natural, organic variation, perfect for sugar grain. Back in the display settings, set the mid-level to 0.5, then lower the strength significantly. Start around 0.003. That's usually enough. You should now see subtle pores forming across the surface. If it feels too aggressive, reduce the strength slightly. With displacement, small values make a big difference. Now, real surfaces have layered detail. There are fine pores on top and broader, softer variation underneath. So let's add a second displace modifier below the first one. Create another noise texture. This time, set the mid-level slightly higher, around 0.7. Keep the strength around 0.003. This second layer introduces larger, softer bumps beneath the fine pores. Together, these two layers create complexity, just like real sugar glaze texture. That's working well. Press Z and switch to Rendered View to preview the result. Take a moment to evaluate it. The surface should now feel tactile, not perfectly smooth. To soften any harsh edges, add a Smooth modifier. This gently relaxes the geometry without removing the displacement detail. Now let's address one more thing. Temporarily hide the Solidify modifier so we can focus on the base mesh. If you notice slight separation or clipping between the glaze and the donut, we can correct that, adding another modifier. Click Add Modifier. Under Deform, choose Shrink Wrap. And remember, modifier order matters. Blender evaluates modifiers from top to bottom. Think of it as stages. First, define the shape, then position it correctly, then refine and smooth it. For the glaze, the order should flow logically. Place Shrink Wrap so it targets the base donut. Use the eyedropper tool to select the donut object. This ensures the glaze conforms cleanly to the surface. After that, Solidify handles thickness. Subdivision smooths the result. Once everything looks correct and you're confident in the structure, you can apply the modifiers in the proper order. And just like that, your donut now has believable surface texture and natural thickness. Now, to refine the glaze for more realistic details, we need to introduce a few additional sculpting tools. So at this point, we'll switch from Layout to Sculpt mode. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the Sculpting Brush panel. These brushes behave very much like real-world sculpting tools. Some brushes add volume, some smooth the surface, others push or pull the mesh. For this stage, we'll focus on just a few essentials. But before we sculpt anything, there's one technical detail we need to address. Even though we added a subdivision modifier earlier, Blender does not automatically apply it for sculpting. So if your glaze still has an unapplied subdivision modifier, switch back to object mode and apply it. This gives us the additional geometry we need. Also, temporarily disable the displace modifier in the viewport. This will make sculpting much more responsive. Alright, once that's done, return to sculpt mode. Here, we'll concentrate mainly around the bases of the drips and along their outer edges. These areas carry most of the visual weight. It's where glaze naturally gathers under gravity. The first brush we'll use is the inflate brush. Press I to activate it. To adjust brush size, press F and drag your mouse to scale the circle. And if you ever forget a shortcut, you can always select the brush manually from the list above, or even down here. When you hover over each icon, Blender shows the brush name, guiding you back. The inflate brush does exactly what the name suggests. It adds volume to the surface. We'll use it to build thickness where glaze would realistically accumulate. Start near the base of each drip. Work slowly. Observe the surface as you go. Some drips should feel heavier, others slightly thinner. That variation is important. Nothing should look identical or patterned. Keep most of your inflate work close to the drip bases. This creates a believable gravity effect instead of flat, uniform drip ends. Gently build up the base of each drip. Not too much, just enough. Sculpting can feel repetitive. It takes patience. And that's exactly why this donut is more complex than it appears. Small details make the difference. Every subtle adjustment adds realism. Try to enjoy this stage. We're not just shaping geometry. We're studying how real materials behave and translating that into form. All right, that's looking good. You can already see the difference. The glaze feels slightly melted now, and that is exactly what we're aiming for. Next, we'll create the thicker glaze lip around the outer edge of the donut. If you've looked closely at a real glazed donut, you've probably noticed that before the glaze drips, it builds up into a subtle ridge along the rim. That small buildup adds a surprising amount of realism. So let's recreate it. To begin, activate the mask tool. Press M. Set the brush strength to 1. Adjust the brush size so it matches the thickness of the ridge you want to form. Not too wide, not too narrow. Keep it proportional. By default, Blender paints through the mesh and affects the backside as well. We don't want that. In the brush settings, enable front faces only. Now you'll only affect the visible surface. If the view feels cluttered, press the / key to isolate the glaze. It makes the process cleaner. All right, carefully paint along the outer rim of the icing. Move slowly and follow the edge where the glaze meets the air. Avoid areas where the glaze is already dripping downward. Those sections already have enough weight. The mask brush requires precision. Take your time here. It's better to work carefully now than to correct inflated mistakes later. Even if the mask looks fine at first, you may notice issues once we inflate. A slightly misplaced mask can create an unnatural ridge. This often happens if you accidentally paint over the sides of a drip. Even a small masked patch there becomes obvious after inflation. So prioritize accuracy over speed. That section needs a quick correction. Let me repaint that area. The darker masked region you see is the part of the mesh that will remain protected. This section, just a little adjustment. That looks better. Once you've completed the full rim, press Ctrl I to invert the mask. Now only the rim area is editable. From the toolbar, choose Mesh Filter and set the filter type to Inflate. Lower the strength to around 0.1. We want a controlled adjustment. Click and drag slowly. Dragging to the right inflates the rim. Dragging to the left deflates it. Increase gradually and watch the edge rise. You'll see the glaze become thicker, heavier. Yes, that's working nicely. That subtle ridge instantly improves realism. It feels like the glaze has settled naturally. Now clear the mask. Go to Mask and choose Clear Mask, Clean Surface. To finish shaping the glaze, we'll soften any remaining sharp transitions. Bring the donut base back into view by pressing the / key again. Activate the Smooth brush. Press S. Before you begin, rotate the donut slowly. Inspect the glaze lip from multiple angles. Set the strength very low. Increase the brush radius slightly. You can press F to adjust the size. Now make one gentle pass across the rim. Maybe slightly larger. Yes, that's better. Move around the donut and soften any harsh edges. Blend gently around the drips, especially where transitions feel too rigid. Alright, now reduce the brush radius again. Refine around individual drips. Soften transitions without flattening the form. We're not removing structure, we're just easing sharp geometry. Focus near the area where longer glaze trails separate from the surface and begin to flow downward. Avoid sharp breaks in this region. Continue rotating the model and smooth wherever needed. Blender allows infinite detail, but restraint is just as important. Every stroke should have intention. Now take a look. The glaze feels more fluid, more natural, less geometric. This is the point where a simple shape becomes believable. And that completes our sculpting stage. Press Z and return to object mode. Re-enable the Displace modifier in the viewport. Take a moment to rotate the donut. View it from different angles. You've added far more refinement than it might seem at first glance, and that's something to appreciate. We now have a properly modelled, well-detailed, realistic glazed donut. Great work. In the next part, we'll add sprinkles and push this closer to the final result. If you're ready, I'll see you in the next video. And before you head out, don't forget to subscribe. It really supports the channel and helps me keep creating tutorials like this. If this lesson helped you, feel free to leave a like or a comment. It makes a real difference. All right, I'll see you in the next one.